Welcome to the Museum of the Moving Image Online. My name is Choi, Assistant Curator of Film at the museum, and I'm delighted to be hosting this conversation on 63 Up, the latest installment of Michael Apted's landmark documentary series. This talk is the third in a series of 4, focusing on the limited series or serial that the museum is presenting in partnership with BritBox, the official streaming platform of the BBC and ITV, and host to the largest collection of British television classics and originals online. BritBox is generously offering these talks to MOMI's members as a benefit to support the museum and our programming, so our thanks to BritBox and their team for making this possible. Since 1964, at intervals of 7 years, the Up series has followed the lives of 14 cis-male and cis-female participants, chosen to emphasize the stratifications of the British class system, and thereby to test the Jesuit maxim, "Give me a child until he is 7, and I will give you the man." In June 2019, the 9th installment, 63 Up, premiered on ITV, with each of the participants approaching retirement, and even one, Lynn Johnson, being the first to have passed on in the interim. 63 Up finds this ongoing project increasingly assuming the feel of a retrospective, more preoccupied with looking back and taking stock than ever before. To discuss this and many other topics related to 63 Up, I'm pleased to introduce several of the film's key creators: Claire Lewis, award-winning producer of the Up series since 28 Up, as well as the anthology's acclaimed Russian spin-off begun in 1991. Cort Kristensen, filmmaker and producer of many Michael Apted productions, including The Chronicles of Narnia, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Unlocked, and the most recent 3 installments of the Up series. George Jesse Turner, BAFTA award-winning cinematographer of the Up series from 1977 to the present. Kim Horton, multiple-time BAFTA nominee and chief editor of the Up series since 28 Up, as well as editor of several editions of both the Russian and South African Up cycles. And last but definitely not least, one of the beloved Up participants himself, Mr. Tony Walker. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
So I'd love to start by just asking each of you to explain or summarize a little bit of how you became involved with the program. And in your case, Mr. Walker, what you recall of the selection process that occurred in 1964, so many years ago.
I can remember it as though it was yesterday. And we were sitting in school in my classroom, and Michael came in at that present time, and he's looking for some children from the classroom, and the teacher suggested me and another boy and 2 other girls, and we were took away. Then we went to the zoo. I think we went to London Zoo, and we went to a lovely party in West London in a lovely big wooden shed. We was all playing records, and then we had an adventure playground, and we all went there. And all the other kids were there, and we was all mixing with them, and that's when we all started to sort of form, 7 Up, and that's how it began. As innocent as that. I don't think no one was asked to go on it on a personal issue. I mean, I went home and I was so embarrassed about my house because we had nothing. I just had like a little armchair in the middle of the front room, and at the time it was my sort of girlfriend came up my house, and I was ashamed that, she was going to go and see what my house looked like. Very humble beginnings, and I still remember as though it was yesterday. Great days.
Cort and Claire, if you tell us a little bit about how you came to the project.
I was working at Granada TV in the late 70s. I joined, and I joined in news, and I started my life as a primary school teacher, so I'd actually seen 7 Up as part of my teacher training, and loved it. And I then discovered when I got to Granada to work there in news as a journalist that Granada made 7 Up, which was fantastic. So I lobbied the then boss, my boss, and said that if it came up, I would really, really like to do it. And that's what happened. 28 Up came up. I'd been off on maternity leave, came back, had a baby and came back. And I was asked to do the research and set up and make 28 Up. And that's how I met Michael, and that's how it all started.
I started working with Michael in 2001.
first as his assistant and then segued into producing capacity for him. We worked together for 19 years, and I was fortunate enough to be brought in unknowingly into one of the greatest cinematic achievements in history. So I came into it by luck and default, and I'm the richer for it. So.
George and Kim, please tell us how you became involved.
Well, I suppose the grandfather of this project in many ways. I first met Michael when he was a trainee director on a location shoot in Leeds with Mike Newell in 1964. And our paths came, me being an assistant, working on some of his early documentaries that he did for Granada, even some of his early drama shoots as well. So when it came to make the version 21 Up in 77, I was asked to do it. And of course, I presume that Michael obviously knew about my work, and it was a great pleasure to do it. Ironically, I could have done it in 1977, but at the time, being a documentary coming on the World in Action series, when they were doing that shoot, I was actually in Vietnam. So I've got many memories in many ways, but here I am, still going strong, and I've had the pleasure to do 7 of the 9 series that have been transmitted.
So, George, was that for World in Action that you were in Vietnam?
It was indeed, yes.
Okay.
I mean, as you know, the original series, the 7 Up, was actually a World in Action project.
Right.
And I'm sure somebody else will tell you the history, but obviously they did 14 Up in 1970. And then obviously, as I say, I was lucky enough to become a cameraman on a main program and not quite 24 years of age, which was almost unheard of today, unless you do it by yourself. But for me, I was in, if you like, the right place at the right time, and the right opportunity came along. Kim?
Yeah, so I started at Granada Television in 1977, and I went through cutting rooms as an assistant, a junior editor, and then I was approached in 1984 when I was a fully fledged editor to work with someone who's become a terrific mate of mine, Oral Otti. The two of us were asked to do 28 Up. And at that time, I probably didn't know much about the series at all. In fact, I grew up in Australia like the founder of World in Action and the person who conceived the idea, Tim Hewitt. And I suppose I was interested in the same things he was interested in, which was the British class system, because Australians feel like they're classless, that everybody's the same, even though that isn't quite true. So I was fascinated by the concept, and it was a terrific thing to work on.
Thank you all. It's really fascinating to hear how all of you came to this, because it's a film about and a project about time very much. And I was really interested to read in your biography, George, how you've noted, and also in interviews that you've done, how you've noted that in a way you've grown up with Up and with the Up participants, just as they've grown up under the lens of the program. And so I would love to hear a little bit about how each of you feels, if you do indeed feel that the project has shaped you, not just your careers, but shaped you as people and as artists, as filmmakers. Anyone can start.
You want me to start?
Sure.
Yeah, go on, I'll go for it. I think there's a number of questions you've asked there. And in simple terms, having done 7 of the programs, I think it's fairly safe to say for me, every time I've been involved in the project, and even in between when we're not actually filming it, I can see parts of my life has transformed, as has the world. So, for example, and equipment being one of them, the original project when it was filmed way back in 1964 with David Samuelson, the cameras that they used in those days were little more than news cameras. They were actually an Oricon, it was an American camera, and a lot of the stuff in the zoo that Tony talked about was with a little Arriflex camera that took 100-foot rolls of film which lasted about 2 minutes. You move that through my career, and I've gone to where I am now, being able to have this conversation with a phone sat upstairs in my little den. And so it's been brilliant to go through from those early cameras through to cameras when we were able to have separate sound systems, and then where we've gone to now with, you know, very sophisticated cameras, which they use obviously for feature films and whatever. I think what I've been lucky enough to do, with Michael's blessing, I have to say, he's often said to me, you know, just, you know what I want, and go and let me do it. And for better or for worse, you know, we never had monitors and things like that. So the huge trust that Michael put in me, particularly in those early programs, was enormous. But I studied each program, and we've tried to capture not just what the participants actually say, we've tried to capture the moods of wherever they happen to be live or where we filmed. So Tony's been filmed a number of times in his kitchens, but each time it's a different kitchen. So, you know, when you look back, oh, that's what a kitchen was like in 1977, or potentially was like, oh, that's the kind of cars people drove in 1977. And yes, we've all aged. We're a bit like a bottle of wine. Hopefully we've got better with age. And, you know, here we are, you know, some, in my case, 56 years along since the original project. And I think we all agree to be part of the history of making this program has actually shaped us as people. I am incredibly sentimental. So to be involved with this project, it ticks every box that I ever wanted. Somebody else.
Claire?
Yeah, it's an extraordinary project because it's important in many ways. It's important personally because the people who are now in the program, what we call our kids, we still call them kids because they were kids when Michael met them. I was in my early 30s, and I met all these people who have subsequently become very important to me personally and to my family. And it's like working with a group of people. It sounds like a horrible cliche, but actually it's completely true. I can go for 8 years without seeing Paul in Australia, which is what happened last June before last. Hadn't seen them for 8 years, turned up at their house, and it was like no time had passed at all. We literally picked up from where we left off. And they are the most important part of the film. Their lives, their views, their ideas, their families, and it echoes within ourselves. All of us see ourselves in all our participants, and also our audiences do as well. One of the reasons audiences love these programs is because it's actually about us. It's about the person who lives next door. It's not about celebrities and famous people. It's about the people who we all live with and know, and it's about our lives of ordinary, normal, but extraordinary people. And it shapes you because it brings you down to earth every 7 years. You realize that other people are going through things that you're going through, sometimes worse. And you actually think about your own life and you measure your life against theirs and you realize what's important. And I think as we've gone through this project and grown with it, it's become more and more, the values have become more and more important. The values that people hold, the way that they live their lives become much more important than the material things, which seem so important when you're in your early 30s and 40s. But now it's all about love, it's all about family, it's all about caring. And it's fantastic really. And I think for me, it's a celebration of the kind of fortitude of the human spirit really.
Lovely.
I guess I'll jump in then. So I guess first and foremost, we should say that Michael's sorry he couldn't be here. He wanted to participate, but he's unwell at the moment and is disappointed that he couldn't take part, but he sends his love to everybody on the screen and is immensely proud of what he lovingly refers to as his life's work. I would say that this was one of the first documentaries I had ever worked on. I started out in development and then jumped into feature production. And I was never interested in the idea of tackling documentary films. They just seemed like such a foreign animal to me. I enjoyed watching them, but trying to make one was like putting a jigsaw puzzle together and not really knowing which pieces go where. But watching Michael and Kim was actually the first person I physically met from the Up team when he came over to edit 49 Up. Claire and I would have these long conversations on the phone. At that point, I was always the gatekeeper for Michael, and we were juggling a number of different projects at any given time. So knowing how important it was, I always had to make sure that Claire's information got to Michael in a timely manner and whatnot. And then I was able to meet George along the way. And I met Tony at a screening we did at BAFTA in Piccadilly for 49 Up, where we brought all the participants together. And it was a magical night, having spent months in an editing room with Kim and Michael, seeing these people's lives unfold, and then to finally meet them in person was something that was quite amazing. And yeah, that was an interesting night, because Jackie had a go at Michael in the film, and when we were cutting the film, Michael said to Kim, "Cort's gonna love this part," and Jackie had a go at Michael, and I said, "Yep, I do love that part." And we showed the film, and the participants were in a back room at the screening room. And after her segment played, Jackie came up to Michael and just planted a big fat kiss on his face and said, "I can't believe you kept it. Thank you. You let my own voice speak for itself." And it's moments like those that I could never replicate. This is a family. I know some of the participants better than others. Being based in the US, I don't get to interact with them as much. But, the core group, I keep in touch with George, I keep in touch with Kim and Claire, and yeah, it is a family. And that was something that was created by Michael and then espoused by Claire, making sure that familial atmosphere stayed intact. So we're all very lucky.
Yeah, can I just jump in a bit? And your Jackie story is amazing, because that's a really interesting example of how we work. I had known for a long time that Jackie was very angry with Michael, very, very cross. She, at 35 Up, she refused to be interviewed by him. I had to do the filming and I had to do the interview because she was so angry with him. By 42, she'd softened a bit, but she was still harboring an anger and a resentment towards him about the way she was portrayed in the film. Come to 49, I knew she wanted to say something, and she said, "I really want to say something." And I said, you must say, and I said, "You've got to say it. If you want to say something and it's important, you say it in the interview. Don't say it to me over a bottle of wine. That's no good. You've got to say it on camera to Michael, because that's what's important." And it so turned out that it was the day my mother had a stroke and I couldn't go to the filming. It's the only filming I've never got to be able to go to. And I rang her and I said, "Jackie, I can't come." She said, "What do you mean you can't come?" And I said, "I can't come. My mum's in hospital. She's had a stroke." She said, "I can't do it on my own." I said, "Absolutely, yes, you can." So they did it. I'd warned Michael she was cross, but I didn't know how it would come out. I said she might say something, but we didn't know what. Anyway, long story. The end of the day, Michael rings me and he said, "Oh my God, she had an absolute go at me. She was absolutely furious. She had a go at me." And I went, "Oh, really? What about?" He said, he said, "It was absolute. I don't know whether it was any good. I have no idea what it was like." He said, "I'm going to send you the rushes. I want you to look at them. I'm not going to look at them. I want you to look at them. And I want you to tell me honestly what it's like and what it's gone." And it was amazing. It was amazing. And we ran it almost at full length, not full length, but we ran that section almost without an edit because it was so powerful. And, it was a testament to Michael that he didn't want to look at it. He said, "I don't know what it's like. You look at it and we'll then see how it goes." So it's kind of, that demonstrates the teamwork that goes on within this team.
Lee tends to be like the outspoken one, and it's a bit like I was at his age, really. In fact, he's very much like I was his age.
Is that a worry?
I think that's terrible. How dare you say that to me? Is that a worry? Why would that be a worry? Do you think I've turned out badly?
No, but sometimes when you look at yourself, you don't always see things you like in yourself, and then you see them in your child and you think...
I don't, yeah, but I never said he'd picked up all of my traits. I actually think he's picked up probably the best. If you're not going to play nice, right, go to bed then. He has a temper that isn't as bad as when he was younger, but it is something that he knows about and he tries very hard to control.
Does your temper get you into trouble?
You're probably the best one to answer that, does it? I mean, you and I have had arguments on occasions.
Did you meet enough men before you decided who to marry?
I mean, what do you mean by settle down? I mean, if you think that getting married, as far as we're concerned, is a case of going to work, coming home, cook tea for hubby, going to bed, getting up, going to work, you're totally mistaken. The whole thing is...
I like it when you shout at me.
I'm not sure you do, really. I mean, I don't know. What happened at 21? You asked me if I'd had enough experience with men before I got married. And I thought that was actually an insulting question, and I got very angry, and we actually stopped filming because of it. And if you look at the tapes of me at 21, I'm sitting, and to all intents and purposes, I might as well have not been there. But I was really angry that you even thought you could get... You wouldn't have asked some of the other people in this programme that question. You will edit this programme as you see fit. I've got no control over that. You definitely come across as this is your idea of what you want to do and how you see us, and that's how you portray us. This one may be the first one that's about us rather than about your perception of us.
It's a very important bit because it really started for the first time the discussion amongst documentary filmmakers about process. Yeah. How much do we allow the participant to, you know, she says, actually word for it, she says, you will edit this programme how you feel, how you think fit, and I won't have anything to do with it. And she was angry about that.
Tony, you had a similar experience with Michael in 56.
No, I think it was about 21 when they were driving me around all the East End hotspots where all the sort of villains and the Cray twins were sort of all brought up, and you know, all the sort of gangster areas, and sort of Michael was sort of laying in wait for me and to come off the rails, and obviously I was on the knowledge of that time, and I had to be sort of had my wings clipped to do anything wrong, and I went through that phase, of course, and I came out okay, as I've been a London cabbie for now 43 years. So, you know, and we had a little chat about that, and it was in the segment of 63 Up in this last episode. But I'd just like to honestly say, being a London cabbie for 43 years, going around London, I picked up John Brisby, who's, you know, the barrister on the programme. I picked up Neil walking along the road. I took him home, we gave him dinner and everything else. I met George and his son while I was having a haircut in Woodford Green. Now, George lives in Manchester, as you appreciate. And it was like looking at a reflection in the mirror. I thought it was a mirage going by. And I turned around and I came back with all the, you know, cake around me, and George would verify it. And there we were sort of having a chat, and can't believe that he was there at that particular time. Then I went in Starbucks one day, getting a coffee. Who's next to me? Michael Apted. I just could not believe it. The programme seems to follow me around with, and Lynn, God bless Lynn, she was the one who sadly passed away, which all the Up team went to her funeral and, you know, prayed. And I saw Docklands at that time, and I gave her a lift when she was here. So it seems to me, everywhere I go, it has a link with me, this programme, and the characters on it, as well as the production team, who I must say, I trust them implicitly, and I really respect their job, and they respect all the participants on the programme, knowing what power that they enhance, you know, towards the subjects of the film. And as I say, I'm very happy on my behalf to be a subject of that programme.
Tony, do you remember we were both on the same plane going to New York, and you didn't know I was...
Mark, when I was 40 years old, my wife bought me a ticket to go to America, New York, for my 40th. So we get on the plane at Heathrow. Not 9, George was on the other end in the same plane. And as we get out, I looked at him, he looked at me, what you doing here type of thing. And George gave me a lift into New York, like in the city. And you went to the Washington, didn't you, or the Warwick? The hotel?
Something like that, yeah. I think
Yeah, I
in New
remember.
York, we probably stayed in the Algonquin or something like that. It would have been, I think, if it was in New York.
Yeah, my hero, James Dean, stayed there.
Yeah.
I know it sounds silly to you, but it just keeps popping up, coincidence after coincidence. And Bruce, who's also on there, my auntie used to do his washing. And Bruce also taught mathematics in the same classroom as when I went to school as a kid, when I was 11. So it just keeps popping up all the time, all these coincidences. And, you know, I think it's fascinating, to say the least.
Kim, you're the only one we haven't yet heard from. And I do, since the question of editing and how you've balanced the views and perspectives of the participants and the feelings of the participants versus the imperatives of organizing and assembling this into kind of linear themes and narratives. I would love to hear from you about how your collaboration with Michael has been and with the rest of the production team, and how you've developed over the years your strategies towards approaching that.
Yeah, well, it's been an interesting journey for me because as an editor, unlike the rest of the team, you know, they've been out there on location, and they've built relationships with these people. Of course, I have watched their lives all these years, but in terms of meeting them, it probably only happens at the odd screening. Tony and I do communicate now through social media, and you know, there are people that I do see time to time on trips back to Melbourne and Australia. I see Paul, but my journey with Michael has been an interesting one in terms of the edit, because editors generally don't go anywhere particularly exciting. They're always in a dark room and usually in a very dull location. But working with Michael has meant that I've actually followed Michael wherever his feature work has taken place. I've generally been close by during the edit of the Up. So I've worked at Warner Brothers in Los Angeles and various facility houses in Los Angeles, because Michael lives in Los Angeles. So since '92, I've been editing the Ups in LA, which has been terrifically exciting for me, because I do feel that I have a bit of a glimpse of Michael's other life and Cort's other life with his feature work. So, but in terms of strategy with the Ups, I mean, it is pretty much the same process each time. I mean, I have to reacquaint myself with the previous programs, which is the archive. Apart from the fact that we have a lot of outtake stuff, but generally speaking, we use the archive is the previous programs. So I have to go through those programs. I have to establish what is happening in their lives with the new generation. I have to think about all manner of things. I mean, you know, it's always an interesting connection. I mean, one comes to mind is Neil talking at 21 about what his future might be. I mean, then it was unlikely that most of what he was talking about was possible because of his situation, living in a squat, having low-grade employment. You know, his prospects weren't great, but he did say at 21 that he thought about going into politics, and lo and behold, you know, he turns into first of all a Liberal Democrat councillor at 42 and has carried on in politics. So some of these things that, you know, were being spoken about, you make those connections, and, you know, it's necessary to have a good a good knowledge of the archive to find these things and to you know, to work with those elements.
Yeah, Kim has a very unenviable job in trying to take mounds and mounds of footage and distill it into a coherent piece that accents what's being said in the present time, being able to highlight it with past quotes. But then at the same time, he's got to fight for how much time we have per segment. And that's based on when commercial breaks are going to happen. I mean, he does a lot of tightrope dancing that, you know, fortunately Claire and I have been able to watch. And, you know, he protects some things, and he'll stand up to Michael on certain things, and at other points he'll take Michael's point or Claire's point or even my point. He is an unsung hero, I guess, in the sense that he has to know what the archival is, and knowing that there's so much of it, because the rest of us can't keep track of it. We've got our heads in so many different spaces, but he is absolutely the protector of the piece.
Yeah, and it only gets larger every 7 years, doesn't it?
Yeah, and interestingly enough, when I joined the project at 28, it was just Michael and myself working on the film, apart from the shoot. And so we developed a system very early on where we would have transcripts. He was in LA and I was in England, and we would have a set of transcripts each, and we would go through with a highlighter pen, because he and I had both been on all the shoots, and we would highlight all the bits that we thought were important on the transcript, and we pull them out like that. So you started off with a long rough cut, and now the system is that system still happens, but Kim is right in there at the beginning with the transcripts too. So basically when we do that process, Kim is right there with it all happening. So he's not joining afterwards. So he will have an early look at how it looks like it's shaping up, and he will already then have his own ideas about what we might put there and what might go there. And, you know, it might seem old fashioned to everybody, but actually when you're working across the pond, as we were when we did 28 and very little technology, it kind of worked, because it was just paper and pens and you know, photocopy, and off you go.
Yeah, those transcripts were the bane of my existence.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think,
I'm sorry, Cort. I'm sure they were.
I think it's worth pointing out that we make this for British TV with, as Cort said, with commercial breaks, and there is a limit to the running times that we work to, because that's set by the broadcaster. And I don't know for how many years we pretty much had the same running time. So even though we add the next installment, that generation of filming, we have to bring it all together. And there's been certain things that are absolutely important in terms of what we know we have to use. I mean, generally 7, 14 and 21 are the ages that really bring with them, you know, the big physical changes, you know, obviously a 7-year-old to 14 to 21. So visually they're important, but equally, you know, whatever is said at 7 is basically, it's almost the premise of the series, isn't it? You've got to have that 7-year-old voice, and as difficult as say 7+7, which sometimes referred to as 14 up, the kids probably weren't the most engaging at times. We always laugh at the way that most of the interviews are done with kids looking at their feet. You know, they're barely able to, you know, look into the camera, and some of them are a bit stroppy about the questions being asked. But that, you know, these are the ages that are really important. And as life passes, you know, there's years where we possibly think, you know, that we could leave sections out. I think once relationships start, once children start to appear, and jobs are not being changed and stuff, it just depends what that material is bringing in with it, and it finds its way into the films that way.
So I think it's we should roll the first clip. This is a clip of Tony, as it happens, and I think it's best to start with that since we have you, Tony. So Leo, take it away.
In 1964, we asked Tony what he thought about the English class system.
The Prussians. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. They're nuts. Just have to touch them. Have you all got to work for it? And it's them who can just ask for money and get it. They can buy what they want.
55 to 20, Boris. £55 20, I'm one of the tailenders. You think, oh, the East End boy, you know, and he ain't got a no good education. But all of a sudden, the East End boy's got a car, motorbike, and he goes to Spain every year. There's no education in this world. It's just one big rat race, and you've got to kill your man next to you to get in front of him.
But at the end of the day, it's always them and us. And for me, it's still them and us. Obviously, if you come from with a silver spoon, you're going to get more attractive jobs and easier life and an easier success. But that don't mean they don't have to work for it. I feel that the economy will bust within 5 years because people like myself have been giving and giving all the time. We're paying. Now, someone's getting it at our expense.
What's your thinking about Brexit?
Brexit? Well, I was a leaver. I wanted to pass in my cab at the House of Commons and look up and think to myself, that's where we make the decisions, like Great Britain. And I thought myself, you know, this is what I wanted. But then again, they've moved the goalposts. And even now, nearly 2 years down the line, I'm even getting second thoughts that we should have remained. I would never vote Tory again, and I've been a Tory vote for all my life.
So, I mean, this kind of raises one of the central issues of the show, of course, social class and the persistence of the British class system. And I was just curious, Tony, you know, your feelings seem in the way that the 63 Up presents it to have more or less remained the same, but there is a suggestion of a kind of softening of tone, maybe. You mentioned that even though you allow, at least, that even though people there are some people who are born into privilege, that they still have to work on some level for what they've got. And I just was wondering if you could elaborate on that and also just talk a little bit about how you're feeling today.
21, obviously, then comments brash and immature. I can understand that, and I'll hold my hands up to that. But once I started work and finding out what life had to offer me, you know, because I still think now the class system is still alive and kicking now in Great Britain, even more so now, what's going on. I remember speaking to Claire about the political side of the situation with my job aspect with TfL at this present time and Boris Johnson. The incompetence what they've done to this country here. And I don't want to talk politics. I remember Claire saying to me, you know, don't tell me, tell Michael, and to the camera and to the world. Just being a London cabbie now, I have got no job. I strive now for 2.5 years on the bike, learning the knowledge. My wife learnt 3 years on the knowledge. We both got no job. They've closed the roads. I haven't detracted what you're trying to say. I'm just giving you these people, men in suits, who make these decisions for the working class people. I have always lived a moderate good life. I've had my holidays, I've had my house in Spain, and I've always sort of worked hard as well as my wife has. You know, she's been sort of 50-50 for her work. But at the end of the day now, I haven't got no job. I really haven't. Now, these people making the decisions for the working class, they're thumbing a stand. They're putting a nail in our coffin. We can't really move. I respect COVID-19, that's understandable, and I buy all the rules and adhere to them, what they got to offer. But as far as the class system is concerned, and this later Conservative government, I said if they had a brain, they'd be dangerous. And it's affecting all the working class. And I've never, ever voted Labour. And, you know, and not that I'd vote Labour now, it's just the fact that my head's being turned and I'm sort of dressed up with nowhere to go. So I don't want to vote Labour because I'll find them too weak and too politically correct. And on the other side of the coin, I've always believed in free enterprise, and I believed in getting up and going out and working. But if you've got no work, what can I do? You know, I'm on universal credit. Think about it. I am now literally what is like the dole, my wife and I. I'm asking for handouts, and probably Claire and all the production team knows that I'm supposed to be a, you know, shrewd nut or whatever you want to call it. But if it affects the likes of me, who I consider myself, you know, one of, not above in an arrogant way, but, you know, I know what I think it's all about to try and get a pan note. If it's curtailing me with this government, then what chance has everyone else got? You know, it's really bad, really bad. Can I just add that TfL now, this new mayor we got, Sadiq Khan, he's asked another £1.5 billion by Monday, or they're going to go bankrupt. And all these men in suits have just got payoffs of over £500,000 golden handshakes and £350 the guy who runs all the transport system. And he's been turned out to grass with a big golden handshake. And, you know, work that one out. Now the TfL have got to go to the government again, cap in hand, on Monday. Otherwise there won't be no trains, or there won't be no buses, and there won't be no transport system to run London. So, who's running this country? Incompetent people. And we're voting for these people. I'm sorry to detract on the conversation, but I've got to get it off my chest.
Not a distraction at all, Tony. We're having the same issues here, believe me.
Yeah, well,
I think
I'm very normally a happy-go-lucky, quick wit, one-liner. I'm very, you know, but while we're having a serious conversation, I'm getting quite emotional with the fact that even now, you know, I've got a cab up there. I haven't paid for six months.
But can I just say that the strength of this series is that Tim Hewitt understood when he came to Britain in the early 1960s to be editor of the Daily Express, which was at that point a really leading newspaper. Because he was an Australian, he was absolutely horrified at the rigidity of the social class system, which is what Kim has already said.
Yeah. And
what's so fascinating, and it took an outsider to be able to make 7up. It took somebody who said, this is what on earth are these kids going to be doing? You know, apparently he went up to the top of the Granada building and he looked out and he said, you know, this is where we are. What are the kids who are now 7 going to be doing in the year 2000? Who's going to be running this country? And what's so interesting is that you've got minor changes in terms of social mobility. Yes, it's not nearly as bad as it was in some ways, but actually the class divide in the UK is almost as bad as it ever was. You've got 25% of families now living on or below the poverty line.
Poverty line, absolutely, Claire.
I mean, and those kids, many of them don't eat enough. It's all come out with COVID. It's the divide is much worse than it ever was. You've got the chance of making it big if you can, just like you always did. But actually, social class, as Tony says, appears to be alive and kicking.
Of course.
I mean, I think you know, the illustration just about what Marcus Rashford's done about children that have not got good food or whatever, and schools and things, and now the government has said, well, we're not going to even give them the food, you know. And that, I think, is just a simple illustration that in my working career, certainly with World in Action, Tim Hewitt and a lot of good editors came along, we would take issues like that and make real programs. Yeah. People wouldn't have liked it because we told the truth. And I think that television, unfortunately today, you have to be seen to be so PC a lot of the time that you just can't be as radical as what World in Action and what they set out when we started this Up series.
Right. So I wanted to follow up on that, actually, because we have a clip of John from his perspective discussing class, and it features an interesting quote from him from when he was 21 years old. And well, let's just take a look at it, and then we can discuss.
When I leave the school, I'm going to college Cort. And then I will be going to Westminster boarding school if I pass the exam. And then we think I'm going to Cambridge and Trinity Hall.
John went to Westminster, then on to read law at Christ Church, Oxford.
I do believe parents have a right to educate their children as they think fit. I think someone who works on the assembly line in some of these car factories, earning a huge wage, could well afford to send their children to private school if they wanted to.
At 21, we asked him what career he would pursue.
Might be at the bar.
Doing what?
Perhaps chancery practice. I now have a career. I'm a barrister. Other than that, life chugs along in varying degrees. Well, in a sense, not very much has changed in my career over the last 14 years. I'm still a barrister. I still wear a curly white wig. The only visible difference, I suppose, is I wear a silk gown because I'm now a QC.
What's changed in your life since we last talked?
7 years older, 7 years fatter, a bit less hair. I mean, nothing much, really. I mean, on a more serious level. I mean, I'm still a barrister, a QC.
When boys go around with girls, they don't pay attention to what they're doing. For instance, my grandmother had an accident because a boyfriend was kissing his girlfriend in the street.
So, I mean, of course, this brings up the question, which I think is a central one in Up, of whether class is destiny and whether class is so determinative of one's outlook in life, one's prospects in life, one's direction in life, that what one says they're going to do or be at 7 ends up being indeed what they are by 63. And I was just wondering if you could all speak to that. And also, I would love to hear, Tony, what you feel about what 21-year-old John said about factory workers being able to send their children to Oxford.
Well, for what you never added, they were singing Waltzing Matilda in Latin at a 7-year-old age. I didn't even know what ABC was till I was about 10. So that puts that in perspective. As far as earning huge salaries on assembly lines, if a family had 3 or 4 kids, there is no possible way living in a council flat, some poor sod who's going to work all them hours, whether it's 40 more hours over the given 40 hours, that'd be 80 hours a week. He could have worked just enough to pay his bills and send the children to a normal comprehensive school, for the clothes, for their dinners, for the housing and the rent and etc., the household bills. There wasn't enough money on an assembly line. You'd have to get enough money somewhere in a more executive role, you know. But going back to John, I've met him on various occasions, and I must say, he's a true friend to me. He's one of the nicest fellas that you could ever have the pleasure of meeting. And I met him when he came off the bench. He had all his regalia on, and I was just having a cup of coffee out by the side of my cab. And I shouted to him, and he came over to me, and we shoot the breeze and just started talking. And he said, "I must go, Tony. I've got a case to do." And he went off, and there we were. But he often gives me tea round his house, Claire and his dear wife. And we have bone china cups, silver teapots. And I cannot speak highly enough about him. He's a gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
That's on my behalf.
Shall I go?
Please.
I honestly believe that the series that Tim Hewitt and 7up got it right. I do believe that social class does determine how you're going to turn out to a very large extent. Not 100%, because there'll always be the exception and the one that got away. But if you look at our cohort of children, all the youngsters who went to private fee-paying schools, very well educated, upper middle class parents, have all done exceptionally well. They have, you know, in a way, one of them could have been running the country. All the others, the working class kids, have also done very well in a completely different way, but they're not running the country. Mm-hmm. So basically, and because when they came out of school in the early 70s, which was a big boom time for the economy, all our kids could choose what they wanted to do. They all got jobs. They've all done very well. They've all done, I mean, genuinely, they've done as much as they possibly could within their own social class, all of them. But they're not running the country. The lawyers and the people who are destined to run Britain are all the people who come from, as indeed it is at the moment within our current government, they're all the people who come from the upper echelons of the upper middle class, who pay for their kids to go to school and who get all the privileges.
Most definitely, Claire.
Kim, I would love to hear, just in terms of editing the clips like that and showing the kind of linear progression of John's life, whether that's something that you, being familiar with the footage, already had in mind for how to show his development, or whether it's something that just sort of try to let these themes emerge on their own.
Well, I mean, it has to be said, we have more than the means of telling their stories, which is, you know, done in the form of kind of recaps going through generations and stuff. You know, and there's if there's any criticism, I mean, we do tend to go back to some of the, you know, the same interviews when we're doing that, but that is simply on the basis that, you know, they are able to give a snapshot of where they are at their particular time in life so well that why wouldn't we use the same sections? You know, it's like Tony saying, I want to be a jockey at 7, and then being an apprentice, working in his free time at 14 in Tommy Gosling's stables in Epsom, which is, by the way, where I was born before I went out to Australia, Epsom. You know, we use those and reuse those sections because they are the keystones of how we build and recap on each person's life. But there are occasions where we'll throw something else in that we haven't used. You know, there are occasions where, you know, we need to feature something that hasn't gone into the series for some while. But anyway, that's the process.
And when that happens, it's always funny to watch Michael's face. Oh, is that new?
So let's move to the next clip. This is a clip of Sue, and she's talking about her and her partner Glenn's decision to remain together and yet unmarried for over 20 years now. So,
I mean, there have been relationships when I could have settled, but they didn't feel quite right. So I've always come away and pulled away and just waited until the right one come along, if they ever do.
At 42, when we filmed Sue in the karaoke bar, she brought Glenn along to watch her sing.
Well, we've been engaged now for about 14 years. I've not beaten any records, but it's quite a long time, isn't it? Yeah. Where you going?
Yeah, I'm old.
So what is the status with you and Glenn?
We're still in the middle of the longest engagement known to man. We've been together now over 20 years. Still not married. Never say never. But no plans.
Where? Goldfish.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We're both fine as it is, and if we do it, it's just going to be, let's do it. A spur of the moment thing, and, you know, we love each other, we've got a nice life.
The boat's there.
He came along at the right time for me. I've been on my own with the kids for quite a few years. He probably had the worst years, really, you know, the teenage years, but he stuck around, bless him.
I love this with Sue because it brings up the question of leading an unconventional life, or a life that's defiant of traditional roles and conventions. And so we've talked a little bit about how class restricts our paths in the world, but I'd also love to hear a little bit about, you know, whether every 7 years when the production team returns to visit with the participants, whether there's a sense of surprise at at something that has happened in their lives, or something new that's changed, or a kind of sense of familiarity when things haven't changed. Yeah.
Grandchildren, that's one. And there's always seems to be a new addition. Could be a divorce amongst the one of the two of the subjects, or one we know of course. And other things, obviously, I'd say grandchildren and other additions to the family. That would be the main interest in my life.
I think for me, I think one of the most amazing things was suddenly to receive an invitation to Neil's wedding out of the blue, because I keep in touch with him and see him regularly. But all of a sudden, the letter arrives, and he's got very distinctive handwriting, and it's from Neil, and it was an invitation to his wedding, which, given, you know, what we filmed in 56 Up, we thought, well, you know, he said, I've never had a proper long-term relationship. I've had relationships, but nothing seems to work out. And there he was, suddenly getting married. And that, for me, was absolutely wonderful. I mean, it's exciting and new, and we were all very happy. So when we made 63 Up and I met him, you know, I've been in touch, and I realized very early on when he told me that the marriage was in trouble, it was a feeling of real sadness, actually. And I'm sure that's what the audience felt as well, because everybody wanted him to find happiness. Everybody was kind of rooting for him, and you know, it hadn't worked out. And I think those are the things that make the series so special, because Neil is so candid and so honest and so open about his feelings and about what he thinks about life, and the way he talks is extraordinary. He's just an unbelievable interviewee, actually. You know, very rarely do you meet people who come over in his way, which is a combination of candor and honesty, frankness, genuine, authentic. And he honestly says things that you haven't heard before, and that's very rare in our business, to hear people say things you haven't heard before. And I think he's probably, it's interesting, I expect Tony will agree. It's, you know, when people stay together against all the odds, it's wonderful as well, isn't it, Tony?
Well, I can assure you I've had a lot of adversity in my life with marriage and that, and I make no bones about that, but we'll leave that for another day.
I think what's great about us examining people's relationships, marriages, family and stuff, it brings other people into the mix, and certainly Michael has said on many occasions that if he was to cast the thing again, he would definitely have to include more women, career women, and you know, there'd be all sorts of other things involved, but in any case, the lack of women has been, you know, a big problem to us. But I suppose allowing partners in, not every partner takes part, but you know, there are quite a few wives taking part, and it's been kind of helpful to have these other women in the series, and yeah, that I'm sure Claire would carry on in that theme.
Yes, I mean, I think, I mean, when I met Michael for the first time in 1983, the first day I met him, it was the first question I asked him. I said, why have you got no women? Where are the women in the program? And he quite honestly said, well, it was 1963 at Granada, It was pre-feminism, pre all the moves in America, or Kate Millett and everybody. None of that started till the early 1970s. Everything was run by men, journalism, television. Women had executive, PA, secretarial roles. Most women stayed at home and looked after the family. There were notable exceptions, but on the whole, and they never gave it a second thought. It never even occurred to the team that they should have an equal number of men and women, of kids. It honestly never occurred to them. And so we discussed it, and I said, well, the way we can obviously help try and put that right is by making sure that where there is a female partner, a wife, they become very strong. And it's vital because, of course, they then become part of the documentary, because it becomes a team. They are the team family then. Tony and Debbie were absolutely, indomitable in terms of those, it wasn't just Tony, it was suddenly Tony and Debbie. And that's really good. I think that the modern day view now, I think, of the industry is that I think we're being slightly punished for it now. I think, I've heard people say it, that the fact is that because we're not diverse enough and we don't have enough women, somehow it undermines the credibility of our series. But to be honest, there's nothing we can do about that. I mean, we are who we are and we have who we have, and that's its strengths, but it's also its weakness. But I think we did our best. We really did our best to try and make sure that we were diverse and as much as we could, and try and put it right. And I think we did do that. I mean, our women, there may not be many of them, but they're very strong.
Yeah, I mean,
and of course, I'm sorry, George, please.
I mean, having, seen how they've all managed to find a partner and marry, whether it's Bruce or obviously Australia, which is, I mean, I think, the partnership where we filmed the two nearly always in a two shot, and for 30 years or 40 years, how long they've married, I think we definitely have done our best to address that issue, as Claire's rightly described, as how it was in 1963. And I think actually, funny enough, I think some of the ladies in the program are good, strong characters, which I think actually, thankfully, they are there, because I think they very much play an important part, definitely of addressing how that journey has taken place in every way. When you think about Lynn, she was very much, when she loved little children and read to them in school and went all the way through, and she was a strong character in that sense of what she tried to achieve. All right, she might not have been likely to finish up running the country or in charge of Marks and Spencer's. Maybe she wouldn't want to be, but God bless her. But I mean, I just think that when I look at the programme with sort of an open mind, and I think we've tried to address that problem very well indeed.
I mean, those three London girls, all three of them, Jackie, Lynn and Sue, are extraordinarily intelligent, articulate women. Given a different set of social circumstances, and this is why I think our film is so strong, they could have been doing anything, those three women. Anything.
Agreed.
Jackie could have been running a company. She is indomitable. She is feisty. She sticks up for herself. All those three working class women could have achieved so much had they been given different opportunities. And they all know it too. Because it's the one thing Jackie regrets is that, I regret that I didn't make more of my education at the time. And that's one of the most interesting things. And it's very poignant, actually, when you look at those three girls, those three women and the women they've become, and realize that they had so much potential and very little way of getting there. Although actually they've done great things. Sue is running Queen Mary College postgraduate courses. So it's horses for courses, but genuinely, I always feel that those three women are extraordinary and really a victim of their social circumstances.
And in a way, the show, like the participants, it was born under very specific constraints. So I think that, the show may have limitations, but all art has limitations. And I think that working within those limitations, you have all done a wonderful job with it. So let's move on to, because we've actually brought up the question of regret, to this clip of Paul and Simon visiting Paul in Australia.
The fact we've been married for 40 years is just really a fluke, really, is. You know, like, we might have... No, but what I mean is we've tried hard, and that's part of the success, but you don't know when you're going to get married that it's going to succeed and go for 40 years. You have no idea.
And you can see Windsor Castle from that house.
Oh, look at that.
We don't actually see each other, touch each other.
Over the years, Paul and Sue have met up with Simon and Violetta when visiting family in England.
Come on, let me get you organised.
But now, for the first time, Simon and Violetta have come to Australia.
We got on really well when we visited them in England.
I think Simon and Paul are very similar. Simon's a very creative, sort of artistic, a beautiful person to be around. And Violetta, oh, her and I are just two peas out of the same pod. I just think it's a wonderful thing to be able to invite them and they be able to come out here, because it's not like it's just across the road. It's a big trip, and they're going to share Christmas with us and our family.
Would your life have been totally different if you'd had the chance Paul had to come to Australia?
For me then, it'd probably been better. To actually try and figure it out now, would it have been better? I wouldn't want to say, because your life is as it is and not as it could be.
Yeah.
I love how Simon puts that. And I think in a way it summarizes a kind of major question of the project, which is this question of looking back on one's life and the possibilities of one's life, and then the choices one made within those possibilities. And I was just wondering for all of you, you know, as the project has continued along, it feels like the future has been less and less of a question, and the past has become more and more important. And particularly in 63 Up, there is this feeling, I think, in all the participants of looking back and taking stock on their lives. I was wondering if you felt in the actual editing and construction of the piece the same impulse and the same, that this is sort of the theme that's taking over.
Well, I mean, personally, I think it's inevitable, isn't it, that they've reached this age, and it is a reflective thing that goes on now. And I mean, we probably encourage it. I mean, some of our questions are, you know, the questions that ask them to look back, and you know, we're all about, you know, having that massive archive of their past. So, you know, it's in our interest to you know, to encourage that. But it still surprises us when people do talk about their regrets. And I know that cut with Paul and Simon, it's probably our first real go at getting them to talk about each of their characters and their lack of confidence, things that they both share, probably because they have a sort of shared background, children's homes, and you know, the lack of having a parent around all the time. You know, this seems to be something that they both shared. But for us, I think we really felt we'd nailed it this time. I think getting the two of them together, and quite, you know, we were quite positive about trying to not have them with their spouses for some of those questions, because we wanted the two of them to compare their lives, you know, with one another. And it was extraordinary how they were both saying, well, you know, I expected Simon saying, I expected Paul to say that because that's what I think, you know. So they had those things in common.
Yeah, it was amazing in the editing room watching the, you know, Paul's interview was done in Australia, Simon's original interview was done in England, and the similarities between the two, just their answers, having never discussed it amongst the two of them, were astounding. And then you add the layer of their past shared history of the children's home, and you could see that they through their lives had touched on a lot of the same milestones. And then coming together and being able to just sort of, in a comfortable situation, address those things together in a shared voice, I think gave them a lot of strength and let them open up more.
Yeah, I think my terrible regret really with this film is that we had no extra time for this film. We had to make a new film and cut it into the same time that we had for 56 Up. And it meant not only did we have to throw out priceless archive, which we all missed terribly, we almost gloss over the reunion between Paul and Simon. There was so much poignancy and so much there that actually we could have, had we had even another quarter of an hour, 20 minutes, we could have got so much more out of it. And for the very first time, I actually felt so sad that we couldn't do the footage justice really within the movie because we just didn't have time. And there's only so much cutting you can do. There's only so much slicing you can do before you actually are throwing out the content that you created. And I think we're very close to that now.
Kim came over with, what were you, 58 minutes over when you landed in LA?
Yeah.
I mean, it was, you know, it is completely heartbreaking. And I know everybody thinks they're priceless, their footage is priceless and it can stay, but when you're dealing with this kind of archive, and we're chucking out stuff from 7 Up and 14 Up that is priceless, you know, in order to get something else in at the other end, which again is the first time we've done it. And that can't really go on. I mean, we cannot go on doing that without completely destroying the films as they are.
Yeah. I do hope that you can convince the powers or persuade the powers that be. That,
I very much doubt it.
Okay. Yeah. It's too bad. It's obviously such rich material and it's every bit deserving to be as long as it needs to be. So keep fighting that fight, please,
We will.
for all our sakes. So I want to move on to the final clip here because I'm conscious of our time running out. And this is a clip of Lynn. And I wanted to end with this for a couple of reasons. One, because obviously Lynn passed on, but also because it addresses, I think, the subject we started with a little bit, class, but also more broadly the social and economic conditions in the UK today, and how the British kind of welfare and state and public services in Britain are kind of being dismantled, perhaps, which is something that I think audiences here in the US can relate to, because I think a similar process has gone on in the United States over the last 30 odd years. So let's roll this clip of Lynn and then we can talk about it.
Good morning. For the last 30 years, banged my head against a brick wall to maintain children's services, but this time around, no one's listening. They say that the work that I do, that anybody can do it. There would be no specialist running it. I may not have a job. You can speak to me today.
Despite the cuts and constant changing of jobs in the library, has it been worth it?
Yeah, very much. All these things that I've said over the years are flying through my mind at the moment, but yes, it has been worth it. And you better cut it, because otherwise I'm going to cry.
I was really moved by this part of the film, I must say. It really struck me that Lynn was discussing this, first started discussing these pressure that she was feeling, these cuts that were happening to the public library system at 49 Up, which is actually the same time that Tony brings up that the economy is going to collapse, which of course it did. Obviously all of us are still picking up the pieces. And I really would love to hear from all of you, and especially all of you who are based in Britain, in the UK, about this problem today. Sue brings up the decline in the NHS, the deteriorating of the council housing system. Peter talks about the dwindling opportunities for young people. Jackie about inadequate disability benefits for her arthritis. Bruce, of course, in 49 Up has just moved from comprehensive school to teaching at an independent school. And all of this seems to be connected to me. And I would love to hear your thoughts on it.
That was my old library, what Lynn used to work in. And I remember going there for the last 3 years in primary school, 7, 8, 9 and 10, going into there, getting our books, marching along. But to see all the demise of all the buildings in Bethnal Green, where I was born and bred, and the shops and the businesses, the hairdressers, all the little nail shops, is quite alarming for me, and it's quite distressing. When I drive my cab sometimes now into the West End, I go along the Strand where the Savoy Hotel is vibrant, businesslike, busy. You go there now and it's like a ghost town. These shops that were there established and has been there for hundreds of years, they're not just closed down, but the signs at the top of the doors have come down and they won't be going back. For me, I feel like crying, because I'm a traditionalist. I'm a sentimental old fool in my London cab. I love London. It's my heritage. And it seems to me it's being cut to down to the bone to such severity. It won't be much longer that I consider there might be some form of demonstration outside the Houses of Parliament, which will be inconceivable, because people really now have had enough of the lies and the incompetence at the people's expense. That's how I feel about it. Might be strong words, as you might see, but I'm ubiquitous. I'm out in the world. I see what's going on. I'm at the forefront of what's there. Even myself, I've been on demonstrations for my taxi trade. I don't want to sidetrack the issue or the question, but it's all there. It's all there with my passion about London and the shops and the businesses and the working class people. And we are not getting a fair deal. And I really, really want to end on it, the fact that I'm very sad about it. I'm sorry to be such doom and gloom, but I've seen it at first hand, and no one can tell me any different. But let's hope there is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, somewhere. That's it.
I think what's so extraordinary about the 7 Up series is that it almost completely charts the way that the economy has grown post-war, flourished. Us baby boomers, those of us who were born at the end of the beginning of the 50s, everything got better and better. Our kids were born in 56. They came into a society where things were getting better all the time. Everybody was getting better. They came out of school when jobs were in full employment and the economy was growing and technology was growing and everything was getting better. And us 60s baby boomers would have, had it all. We did. And then all of a sudden, the big circle, the curve that was happening has started to come down the other side. 2008 happened, the Great Crash and the recession that then hit. You had 1980s in England. And the UK, we had the recession, we had destruction of the manufacturing industry. It was all to do with the economy. So what's happening now is we came up to the top and it's now coming down right the other way. And I think that the films will reflect that growing of Britain stronger and giving people loads of opportunities and then suddenly starting the other way and sliding down again. It's fascinating. I mean, in an objective way, it's completely fascinating. But that is what's happening.
Yeah. George, Kim, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I think Claire summed it up. I mean, politics, of course, is another thing. I mean, we've got a situation now where many people voted for our current regime on the basis of Brexit, and I feel that, you know, what this government has neglected to do and will need to do is to basically put money into social services in a big way. I mean, they're going to have to, otherwise, you know, Tony's protest outside of the House of Commons is just going to be, you know, a violent uprising, because, you know, there's people that are doing so well out of all manner of things. I mean, you know, with all those declines of industries, you know, that the working classes, you know, worked in, there's been a rise of other forms of businesses that, you know, a whole bunch of people have done particularly well at. And if you look at the Tories now, there are, you know, they're all wealthy men in their own right. I mean, apart from politics, they've got all sorts of investments and you know, offshore accounts and everything, and they continue to reward, you know, supporters of the party, and with all manner of business contracts. And you know, I'm sure in America we have some parallel with what you guys have had under Trump, but I just feel like, you know, that there's been a big mistake in propping up some of these political parties, and I think we'll be paying the price for the way that Boris Johnson's managed to attract the kind of the working class vote in so many areas, so many parts of Britain. I mean, in the northeast, you know, these are meant to be lifetime Labour areas, and he's won them over. But I just think things are going to get worse and worse and worse for, you know, for ordinary people, for working class people.
I could elaborate on that, Kim, with the previous government of Cameron and Osborne. But if I was to start spouting off of the incentives and the golden handshakes that they got for implementing Uber, I would end up getting in trouble. But the situation is, our dear Chancellor, Mr. Osborne, who left office, BlackRock, who invested £500 million in Uber, was then, after he left Mr. Osborne, BlackRock gave him, for 1 day's advisory role per year, £655,000 for 1 day per week. Now, what's that, nepotism? What is it, corruption? Or what is it, a backhander? I don't know the answer, allegedly. But saying it, it's not fair. It's not fair at all. That one man has so much power over the working class people like myself. And I'm an happy-go-lucky. I'm not resenting. Good luck to anyone who's got millions of pounds and the big houses and the boats. Good luck to them all. The Philip Greens of the world who have done everything wrong but got the lot. Good luck to them if you want to be like that. I'm never resentful. I'm a happy-go-lucky nature. I'm not envious. I'm not jealous. At the end of the day, when you cut that cake up, and there's the people who give you it all and got you there in the first place, just give them it back a little bit. Don't steal the pensions like some people I've just mentioned. Give back the people who give you back, who give you where you are now today and put you where you are. That's all. Want fair share. You had Robert Maxwell, you know, it could go on and on. It's all there. That the working class were the lambs to the slaughter. And that's it. It will never happen to me again, because I'm going to be cynical-minded and rather play a fair hand. I might play a hand that I might be picking my own cards. And it's as easy as that. And that's it.
George, you were going to say something.
I mean, I find.
Sorry, Claire. Sorry, George. and Kim.
Over the last 20 minutes, I've found it very interesting to hear other people's views of the situation that prevails in Britain. The one thing that I would like to say, bearing in mind, I'll do this very briefly, my son lost his hearing about 10 years ago, and to see the cuts that he has had to endure to try and to look after people that need help with hearing aids is appalling. And that's just one example. And I know the people that work in, dealing with children that are abused and beaten up and one thing over in Lancashire. And it's an uphill battle. And they have to stop some of the greed that does go on. I will name, I think, the way that these big tech companies like Amazon and all the others very shrewdly manage to pay very little tax in this country is obscene. When you see them, you know, they have all this delivery with Amazon, so the shops are closing. Just here in Warrington, there's been a factory making soap powder for more than 130 years. Yesterday, it closed with 130 people being made redundant. That has to stop. There has to be somewhere fairness takes place. Tony and all of you have all got your views about what's gone wrong. Well, if we know what's gone wrong, then it has to be two wrongs don't make a right, but something needs to be done. And the sooner that happens, whether it's going to happen in the next 5 years, whether it'll happen in my lifetime, I do believe that we are strong enough to bounce back, but by hell, there's going to be some pain before then. And I mean pain in something I don't want to mention, but it's very, very depressing at this moment in time for good, honest working people who have a right to have a decent job with a decent home, with a health service, not being ripped off every way. Oh, well, you can go privately. Well, you can't even go privately. You know, there's queues now for people waiting 6 months still more to be treated for cancer, the people that should be having other operations. This isn't fair for these people that should endure that physical and mental pain that's taking place. Now, it may be the same in America, it may be the same in Germany, but when you live in a country with 64 million people in it, it is not right what's happening to good, honest people that deserve to be treated better.
Here, George.
Here,
Sorry,
indeed. Here, indeed. This brings up, I think, you know, what Peter mentions about the narrowing of opportunities for young people. And Tony, I'm really actually quite interested. I know that you are taking care of, I believe, one of your granddaughters.
She's very grown up now, and she's 21 in May the 1st, and she's passed most tests to become a vet. She's doing very well, exceedingly well now, and we're very proud of her.
That's great. Yeah.
I couldn't ask for more.
That's wonderful to hear. It does seem that this was a source of anxiety for many of the participants in 63 Up, and that in the case of particularly Lynn, of course, whose clip this focuses around, that she was very devoted to children and to children's learning and upbringing. And I would love to kind of end with each of you sharing your memories of Lynn.
Well, I met Lynn on various occasions, and I must say a dedication to her job and them children was there to be seen. Her dedication and her love to her family, her two daughters and Russ, her husband, was there, a testimony for her marriage to be seen. A very honest, very genuine, very lovable, very caring, and one of the most beautifulest ladies I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. I picked her up one day, meeting her coming across the bridge in Docklands, and it was raining, and I called her in to come into my cab. Hello, Tony, can't believe it's you. Oh my God, you know. Jump in, and I took her to her car, save her getting wet. We had 5-10 minutes talking in the back of the cab, talking all about everyone else, the production team and the program and the job and various other things. And it was really a very nice, good time, which I take. And when she sadly passed, her children gave me a great, great honour. They said to me, Tony, could I collect the memorial book, the Book of Condolence? And I collected it. I was the last one out of the church. And I waited for I picked Claire up, Simon up, a couple of the cast members from when we went to the cemetery, and we said our goodbyes. And I don't think not one of us never had a tear in her eye for her. She was a much loved, much respected participant of the Up series. And I know that her input was absolutely fantastic, but she will be sadly missed from the show by all the production team as well as myself.
Yeah, I mean, Lynn's voice was absolutely uncompromising. She was completely indomitable, her spirit. She was angry, she was feisty, she was uncompromising in her beliefs in equal opportunities and everybody getting a fair share. She defended her children, she looked after other people's children, she worked absolutely tirelessly, non-stop. She was a governor of her primary school, and in her terms of her ideals, she never compromised. She never compromised on what she believed, which was traditional working class labor values, equal opportunities for everybody, women's rights. And that's, once that voice has gone from the film, it's there with Jackie and Sue as well, but Lynn was absolutely uncompromising about it. And she hated making the film. She absolutely hated every minute of it. And every time I went to see her, we started a new film, she would start to smoke and get upset. And yet she always did it. She always took part. She carried on, even though she absolutely hated doing the interviews. And that's the kind of person she was.
I must also add that in her school, St Saviour's in Popular, all the children put a memorial up in one of the classrooms of there, and it's a legacy that she's got there. So it's really nice.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say, Tony.
Sorry, George.
No, not at all. But I'll just embellish it. One of the very first sequences I filmed with Lynn, which you see in 21 Up, she's in the library bus and we're driving along and she's in the passenger seat. And after we'd finished that sequence, she had a couple of books and she gave me them to give to my son, who at the time was just 6 years of age and was beginning, obviously, to learn to read. And when, sadly, she passed away and they made the dedication in the school with the plaque that you just talked about, and to see these young children who were, very similar as my son was at the time, I thought, here we are to see this full circle, that what she believed in was children reading and learning. And she did it in such an honest way that she engaged with everybody. You can see when she was in that library with people with disabilities, she looked at them, she looked them straight in the eye, and she gave them enthusiasm. She gave them encouragement that they could conquer whatever problems they had. So yes, I agree with you 100%. What she's left as legacy that will be remembered for a long time is definitely down to Lynn.
Lovely words, George. Lovely words.
It's a wonderful example of the hidden lives that people exist, that people live, and nobody knows who they are, nobody knows what they do, but they live amazingly moral lives, and they live and breathe all the things that we should all live and breathe. And she's a real example of that.
Yeah, I remember when Claire, you called Michael to tell him that she'd gone into the hospital. And I just remember him hanging up the phone, and there was just this silence. The air had been sucked out of him. And then when we got the news that she had passed, it triggered another even stronger emotional response. But one of my favorite memories was sitting in the cutting room for 63 Up and looking at her sequence for the first time. And it's just Kim, Michael, and myself, and the room is dark. We've got the door closed. Michael and I are on a couch. Kim's in his chair at the editing controls. And the sequence stops, and we all look at each other like, I'm not crying, you're crying. No, I'm not. I mean, we all had that visible reaction with tears just like welling up in our eyes. And I've got to go. It was, it was
lovely.
Yeah, just
lovely.
Such powerful emotions.
I think what was tremendous about our final piece was the fact that the family wanted to discuss her life. So her two daughters wanted to put their thoughts, and of course Russ was somebody who didn't talk about Lynn not wanting to be in the film. Russ never wanted to take part, and would go some way, to say that he didn't want to, so he didn't really contribute an interview. But on this occasion, Russ absolutely wanted to be there at the, with his two daughters to support them, and likewise they supporting him, to talk about her life and her unfortunate final moments in hospital, and it was terrifically moving to edit that sequence. But at least at the end of the film, we were able to go to her beloved kids in that library singing that song, and it was I thought a really fitting end to our film.
Yeah, I think she'd have loved it.
Yeah.
I want to thank you all for sharing some of very private emotions. So thank you so much. I'm sure our audience will appreciate these thoughts. And I wish we could talk for longer. There's so many other issues that 63 Up brings up. I cannot wait for the next chapter. So thank you all. Thank you very much.